Hi, I'm Simon and welcome to the 6th episode of Gamers Living Room. And as this is episode number 6 and in keeping with the previous 5 episodes, I'm going to be showing you my 6th games system and a favourite title from it. Now, this games machine was my main gaming platform for around about 10 years. So as you can imagine, there were literally hundreds of games that I played on it. And that made it difficult when whittling it down to one favourite title. But I managed it because for me there was one that stood out just a little bit more than all the others. And I'm really excited to show it to you. So, let's take a look. So, which gaming platform could have been my main system for 10 years? Well, it could really only have been one thing, couldn't it? It is the IBM compatible PC. The original IBM PC dates all the way back to 1981, and this, although is not an IBM machine, it's a clone, if you will. It's a compatible system. And that was the great thing about the IBM PC, that others went forward and created their own versions of it, and it brought home computing to the masses. Today's Windows PCs are all compatible with the same code that was used for the original IBM PC. Now, I didn't get into PC gaming as early as some of my friends because to me it seemed like an inferior machine to my Amiga. But as time moved on, the Amiga stood still, and the PC, due to its nature of being upgradable, continued to push the boundaries of computer gaming. And it wasn't until 1995 that I felt the need to get a PC. It just so happened at that time I started a computer science course at college, and so it seemed like the right time to get into PC gaming. It was at that point that gaming on the PC really looked a good leap ahead of what was available to me as an Amiga owner at the time. I'd saved up quite a lot of money, and crazily, I mean, it seems now, thinking back on it, it cost me £1,049 for my very first PC. And that PC didn't actually come with a keyboard and mouse or a CPU. This sounds nuts, but my friend was upgrading his machine from a 486SX to 486DX4 and so he gave me the 486SX chip and as a starter for my system. So I took it to the local computer shop and said, I've got a CPU, I just want the rest of the components, can you build me a PC? And luckily my friend had got a keyboard and mouse going spare as well, so I didn't need to pay for that. And yeah, I paid £1,049. At that time, the early Pentium systems had just been released, and I really wanted to get one of those, but they were just that little bit outside of my price range. I couldn't stretch that extra bit to get a Pentium 60, or well, the Pentium 90 was kind of like the creme de la creme of PCs at that time. So I couldn't get myself a Pentium, so I had to go for a 486, but it didn't matter because I was still able to play a lot of the games that I wanted to. And I was more than happy to be joining the PC club. It was all very new to me and there was a lot to learn. So it was a great experience, and it's one that continued, as I said, for 10 years or so. This isn't my original PC. It's not even the original case, unfortunately. I think this was actually the second case that I owned, bought around about 1998, something like that. The internal components have been completely stripped out numerous times and replaced. And this current system is actually running an Asus motherboard, the A7V333, with an AMD Athlon 1800 Plus processor, 512 megabytes of RAM, and a 64 megabyte ATI Radeon 8500 LE graphics card. Now, I can remember playing the original Half-Life and Counter-Strike on this machine and having great times playing them. But of course, as time moved on, you need to upgrade. And I moved away from the larger form factor cases and moved into these. Shuttle XPCs. Now, this is actually the second one I owned. I bought this in 2008. It's running an AMD X2 5000 processor, and it's got a Zotac NVIDIA GeForce 9600 GT graphics card with 4 gigabytes of DDR800 RAM by, I think it's OCZ, it's made by. And this is the system that I can remember playing the original Modern Warfare on, and whoa, I was blown away. I loved that game. Played it for months. Just the single player. I think I barely played multiplayer on it. I just loved the game. It's one of those games, much like the original Far Cry, that pushed the system to that next level. And both of those games are ones that I felt were really well coded. They were really well made, that they could run on quite a mediocre system. Even at the time I got this, it was a middle of the range system, but it ran Modern Warfare beautifully. And much like older systems I've had, where I can remember having, again, a middle of the road machine, but Far Cry still looked amazing on it. Now, this was my last gaming PC, but not actually my last PC. I've got one more, and I think it's more suited to, well, this environment. It's actually a PC for the living room. It's an HT PC, a home theatre PC, and it's sitting just over there. This PC is actually less powerful than the Shuttle, but it's much better suited to its purpose. Now, I bought this system back in 2009. It's actually running an 8-bit motherboard, the AN78HD, which was one of the only few at the time that had an HDMI out, which was what I really wanted it for, to be the heart of your entertainment system. For high definition content, it really needs to have an HDMI port. So there weren't a lot of choices, and I've got to say I wasn't really that happy with it. I thought it was the motherboard, because I'd had an 8-bit before and I'd had numerous problems with it, really didn't like it. But it had been many years and I thought, okay, I'll give them a go again. And I had umpteen problems with it, but I think it was all down to running it with Windows Vista. What a complete waste of £90 that was. And the machine works fine now because it's running Windows 7, but I still feel like I've been mugged, because really Windows 7 is just what Windows Vista should have been anyway. So not that happy with Bill Gates for that one, but the system works now. It's also running 4 gigabytes of RAM and has onboard graphics in the form of the GeForce 8200 processor. It's got a Blu-ray drive. In fact, it's an HD DVD combi drive, so it's great for all of the high definition content that I've got. Now, I had a fantastic 10 years as a PC gamer. Don't get me wrong, I really, really loved it. But it got to the point where I felt I just had to give it up because of the cost. It seemed to be every 6 months or so I was upgrading a graphics card or the RAM or a new motherboard or all the components. It just got frustrating. And it just seemed to me, and it's been a good choice, that console gaming is a much better solution. You buy the system, You put the games in, they just work. There's no fiddling around, worrying about, will the operating system hate this game? Will my hardware specifications not be enough? All of that headache is gone. But that's not to say that I don't miss gaming on the PC. Sure, high-end gaming PCs have much better graphics. For first-person games, the servers can have more players on them. And I really miss playing, especially the first-person games, on a keyboard and mouse. No matter how much better I get at using a joypad, it just doesn't compare to using the keyboard and mouse peripherals. They're just, for me, the best things for those types of games. And it's really annoys me that Microsoft won't allow you to plug your keyboard and mouse into an Xbox. It's a real shame. But anyway, PC gaming was fantastic. Lots and lots of great memories. And that's where it started to become really difficult picking a favourite game. As I mentioned, things like Half-Life, Half-Life 2, Counter-Strike, Far Cry, the original Modern Warfare, they were all great games. And yet there are more fantastic memories I've had. It was very tough picking a favourite game, but one of them that came close was the XWing games. I absolutely love these. I can remember playing the very first XWing game. It wasn't even on my machine, it was on a friend's system. Being able to be Luke Skywalker, to fly his X-Wing against the Empire in a real simulator, not just some on-rails shooter, as much fun as they are, but it seemed like God was answering my prayers, because it seemed like only a few months before I played the game the first time that I was having the thought that, God, wouldn't it be nice if one of these flight simulator type games could actually have Star Wars vehicles in it. My prayers were answered with X-Wing. And as much as I love this, it's still not my favourite game on the system. There was something else, again, that came close. Something that still to this day holds probably some of the best gaming memories I've got. It's a game that was flawed, unfortunately. The dream of the creators was too much for the technology that was available at the time. It was an online, massive multiplayer game. In fact, it still stands as really being the only massively multiplayer online FPS. Man, I can remember the first time getting into a real full-scale battle in that game, coming over a hill and seeing a base with probably 200 people fighting over it, just standing there for a few minutes looking out and thinking, every one of these people that I can see fighting are real people somewhere in the world controlling these characters. And that game was this one. Planetside. Oh, it's an amazing, amazing title. Unfortunately, as I said, even having an early, at least this is in the UK at least, the broadband speeds were just not fast enough. The PCs were not powerful enough to handle the amount of data. It got some really, really choppy frame rates when the action got close and got intense, and it's such a shame. And one of the greatest pieces of news that I've heard this year, last year actually, it was just at the very end of last year, I happened to pick up a copy of Edge magazine, just by chance. I haven't really bought that magazine for a long time. I was flicking through it and I saw there's an article for Planetside 2. Yeah, SOE, are bringing out a new Planetside game, and finally the technology is there to handle what the creators of this game really dreamt of. And so if anything's going to bring me back to PC gaming, it will be Planetside 2, and I'm going to have to start saving my pennies, because I don't think this old rig definitely isn't going to be good enough to run it. I mean, I wouldn't even care if it was low resolution graphics. with really basic cell shaded, or just as long as I could play the game, I wouldn't care. So, fingers crossed. Maybe there'll be something I can do to get some old life out of this beast and play Planetside 2 when it arrives. But as much as I loved Planetside, still not my favourite game of all time on this system. In fact, my favourite game, you have to go all the way back to my early days as a PC gamer. In fact, this game even stretches back to before my time as a PC owner. And I actually had it on the Amiga, but I didn't really like having to swap all the discs, and it felt a bit clunky on the Amiga. Didn't seem to work as well as I'd hoped. And that game is this one. UFO Enemy Unknown, or XCOM UFO Defense as it's known in North America. This is without a doubt my favourite game on the PC, and for me it's one of the best games that's been created on any system. Granted, it's not going to be everybody's cup of tea because it's a turn-based strategy game, and that means compared to many modern games it's very slow paced. But I love it. It's through the slow pace that it builds a real sense of suspense, and there's a real level of oppression when fighting against the enemies. It's almost fear-inducing. It's odd. You might not really understand that until you start to play it. The roots of UFO can actually be traced back to Julian Gollop's Rebel Star series that started in 1984 on the ZX Spectrum. Laser Squad was to follow in '88, and then the following year on the Amiga, and that's when I first fell in love with it. UFO can really be considered as a natural successor to Laser Squad, as it fleshed out the squad-based strategy element with other gameplay features and an overarching story to hold it all together. It's a very simple concept. Earth is under attack. It's being invaded by an alien force. And your job as commander of XCOM is to defend Earth. The governments of the world have banded together to fund your group to rid them of the alien threat. So it's partially an asset management game, and it's partially a turn-based strategy. Your job is to intercept the alien crafts as they come to Earth, either destroying them straight away with your interceptors, or bringing them down and sending out your squads of men to take out the alien forces. It's a beautifully, beautifully crafted game, and for me, it really came at the right time, because this was a time period when the X-Files was at its height. It was so popular, and I loved the X-Files. In fact, ufology is something that I've always been interested in since a little child. I think it was my mum having books of the paranormal, things like the Reader's Digest books, and I can always remember being really engrossed in those. I guess in some respects it's something to do with growing up in the era of Star Wars, that you're looking to space, you're thinking, well, what if there are creatures out there? And of course I had a healthy diet of Star Wars for most of my early life, and so naturally my interest in space and the questions of are other intelligent life forms really out there is always something that's played on my mind. And so this game obviously combines two things that I love, video games and ufology. And at the time of playing it, one of the things that I loved the most is that I thought, my God, the designers of this game know everything. They've tapped into the mythology of ufology so well, because I just read this book, Alien Liaison. And this is a non-fiction book by Timothy Good, who's an investigator of ufology, and he's spoken to eyewitnesses and people who believe they've been abducted by aliens, fighter pilots, generals, all people from different walks of life, and he's built his own view of what is really happening. He believes that there are aliens visiting us, and they have a somewhat menacing agenda. And so Microprose had really tapped into this book. It wasn't until many years later that I realised that's exactly what they'd done. That they'd read that book and used many of the ideas as the basis for this game. And I just absolutely love it. And one of the true tests of, as far as I'm concerned, of a good game is, how do you feel when you play it now? And playing this recently, I hadn't played it for a couple of years, but it is something that over time I come back to again and again. And I decided, as I knew I loved this game, I wanted to give it a good playthrough again before making this video. And I must say, it's just as addictive, and it really captures my imagination as much as it did back then. Sure, the game is not without its faults, and I'll be pointing those out in a minute, but it's a fantastic piece of gaming history. So, I think the best thing to do is just to set up the HTPC, put this bad boy in, and let's have a look. And I can show you really why I love this game so much. Unfortunately, at this stage of the game, all your guys have got to protect them is a boiler suit, and that's not really going to do much against an alien plasma rifle.